Hey guys, Omni here. It's time to talk about the second movie I saw today, and that was, ironically enough, the opposite end of the spectrum from Shazam. Right after Shazam, I went directly into Pet Cemetery, and whoo, was that such a buzzkill. I, After the high that was Shazam, this movie was a completely different experience. I haven't read the book, but I've read a couple of notes on what the key differences were between the original and then the first film, the first attempt at adapting this book into the screen form. There's definitely a lot of differences and changes even between the film version that previously came out and this one. This one, the I grew up and I watched the original. I watched Pet Cemetery 2 as well. They had like a sweet spot in my heart growing up as a child. They were, dark as in a way, but like, as a lot of movies did from that time, it had a little level of camp to it. Um, some solid and iconic performances in that from the original Judd, who's played in this one now by John Lithgow, and he does a solid performance. Now, the big difference that I'll say, at least because a lot of people looking back on the original Pet Cemetery, at least the film, there's that campiness, there's the cheesiness, there's the quality of the time that just doesn't carry on now. Like between Gage being, this undead murder child and the iconic Judd performance in the original with such great delivery and echoable quotes from that film. In just like that creepy, campy, old school horror kind of way. And this movie just throws all of that out. This movie is dead serious from the get go. It is committed to this tone. It is committed to doing this gritty, serious adaptation of the book. Now, like I said, there's some differences even from the book itself. This dives into the lore a little bit deeper than the original film did as for the origin of the cemetery itself. There's a lot more eerie involvement into how it gets set up and how they're introduced to it. This movie is paced really well. I will say this movie does a lot of great things. It sets mood amazingly well. This movie sets tone amazingly well. This movie is paced, I think, really well. I've heard some people say that like the beginning half of the movie felt extremely exposition heavy, and sometimes it was, but I feel like it was organic in the way that it approached it all. I don't feel like any of it was really forced or excessive. It tells you everything you needed to know. By the time the things get going, you don't really need anything explained anymore. After they get all of that out of the way, it's full gear for the whole midsection onward for this film. But they set it up great. Everything is a slow build. It is a slow, steady, well-paced build until, like I said, things take a turn. And the biggest difference in this movie from the original and the book is not Gage that becomes the child that, dies in the instant with the truck. This movie does it instead with the older daughter, Ellie, which is probably the most drastic change between the mediums. And I think this change was one of the most effective changes. It definitely poses a completely different dynamic because Gage was what, two at his oldest point in the movie and in the book. And as creepy as a murder toddler might be, I think it's a lot eerier, and it carries a lot more weight and threat for it to be a slightly older child, especially one you've had more time with that had a personality built. Because Gage was a child, he was still learning to talk. He could only put together like rudimentary sentences. He could barely walk. When you think about it, realistically, it comes into the kind of Chucky scenario where you're just like, you're an adult. If this thing's trying to kill you, couldn't you just like punt it across the room or just pick it up and just like, no? And that at least gets tossed out the window as an excuse with Ellie. She's, I think, 9 in this film, 8 to 9, because her birthday takes place during the middle. Um, I'm not going to go into any other key differences between the book and the movie and the original, because if you come into this not prepared and like expecting either one of those outcomes, you will at least be surprised. There's a lot of elements that carry over that I feel like needed to be toned down just a little bit. I didn't think they made a whole lot of sense in this version. And I feel like Rachel's backstory gets hammered in a little too much in this movie. And I would say that despite the exposition we get, I feel like I would have liked even more explanation as to the history of the burial ground and stuff like that. And, has anybody else used it? How it got to be. More so, it's just like, you don't understand old things. And then it just, you wave it away as you don't understand magic. Which I don't know if it was like that in the book. I don't know if how much deeper it goes into it. They do talk about the lore of the area, the Wendigo of the woods, the Native American tribes that lived in the area that originally inhabited it, that whole area, and set up the pet cemetery, or not the pet cemetery, but the burial ground behind the pet cemetery. They set up a lot of that, but then it's just kind of like hand wavy away, which is fine if you want to like turn your brain off once you're watching this, because after a point, you just have to go with the flow. And I feel like every character in this movie has such a solid personality, except for the main character, the Lewis, the doctor, the father. He's the person we're following through all of this, and just every moment you're just like, are you making the right decision? I don't think you are. You obviously have some problems. He has we know the least about him in this movie than we do the rest of the family. And he's our primary character. He's the one we're seeing the whole events unfold from his point of view. And I feel like that kind of detracts from it a little bit. However, every other aspect of this film is really solid. The sets are amazing. The child actors are really solid. I feel like everybody in this movie does, acting wise, everybody in this movie does such a solid job. Even the father. He despite his character not having a whole lot to work with, this performance, he gives it his all, and it's so good. And John Lithgow taking in this iconic role of Judd and completely making it his own, and he does in such a heartwarming way that you really do fall for this guy, and like his backstory, his history with his family, and how he grows to be attached with this family here. And it really sets itself apart. But this is a dark movie. There is no camp. This is, if you want to go watch a movie and just feel bad by the end of it, this is a movie for you. I have to say, personally, I would say objectively, this movie is probably an 8 out of 10, 8 or 9 out of 10. Personally, I want to see a movie that has a goal, that has like a clear through to end point. And if you know how the original book or the original film ends, you kind of know what I mean. It's very open ended, and at the end of it, you can kind of feel unsatisfied because you don't get like closure with a lot of things. And I will say that you don't get closure in this movie. I'm not, like I said, no spoilers at all. But if you're familiar with the previous works, you kind of know what I'm getting for. But this takes it to a whole other level, because I will say the ending is different. They do not end this the way that the book ends. They do not end it the way that the original film ends. And let's just say, like, after watching Shazam and then coming into this, man, did I go from 0 to 100. Or actually, I went from 100 to 0 in my range of mood. Because after Shazam, I was hyped, I was excited, I was giddy, and this movie just crushed my soul, man. I can't put it any other way. And, I know a lot of people dig that. I get it. I love going to scary movies, but I like having something to root for, and there's nothing to root for in this. There's no one to root for. It's just it's just kicking the balls after kicking the balls after kicking the balls. And by the end of it, you're like, I just gave away X amount of dollars and just kicked in the balls for 2 hours. uh, I mean, it's good. It does exactly what it sets out to do. And I can't fault it for that. That's why I said objectively, this is a solid film. At least personally, I think objectively that it is. I think it nails all of the technical beats. The cinematography is gorgeous. The acting is really great. Even the child actors for Ellie and Gage are really solid. And everybody gives a wonderful performance. Special effects when they're there, mostly all of this is practical effects, aside from a few things here and there, and they all look great. There's some gruesome imagery in this. There's some awesome shots in this, and the music, the sound mixing, everything like that is solid. There's a couple of jump scares. Not This movie is not reliant on jump scares. I'm happy to report, and the few that it has makes sense because they're kind of built into the world. Like, nothing bothers me more than watching a horror movie and the jump scare is the roommate friend just kind of jumps out from behind a wall and goes blah, 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 for no reason. But like the area they live in, the jump scares that do happen make sense. They're earned and they fit into the established narrative and world that you're living in. So I can't fault it for that. Everything else, it sets up this creepy, eerie ambience throughout the film and delivers on every bit of it. But I don't know if I could watch it again. I might one day. Just whoo, man. Like I said, I went from up here to right down here after the end of this movie. After going from one to the other, I really wish I was able to do these the other way. That was actually the original plan. I was going to see Shazam Thursday, but plans fell through and I had ended up having to see both films today. And unfortunately, I had to watch Shazam first and then go into this pitfall of depression right after that. But still, I would recommend seeing both of these movies. I recommend seeing Pet Sematary, if not as a fan of horror, if not as a fan of Stephen King, or just as a fan of the original film. This is a good movie. It's really solid. Like I said, it has that same problem that the original had, is you're not necessarily rooting for anything. There's not really a foreseeable end goal. I mean, I guess the end goal is a happy ending, but nope. Not for Stephen King. You're never getting like a full-on happy ending with that dude. So expect that. I don't know. That's it. I don't know what else I can say about it. That's all I can really put together for it. I don't know if that's a solid comparison. Like I said, I personally don't like this kind of, I love horror movies. I love them, but like this is, if you watch it, you will probably know what I mean with there being like an arc or an end goal or something you can follow and root for. And neither this or the original really have that, but it still has this lure to it. And I can't quite explain it, but you just have to see it for yourselves. And when you do, let me know what you thought. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the book or the original film. I'd love to know. I'd love to talk about it. And I'm sorry for rambling about this for a little too long, but thanks guys for stopping in. If you like this, check out my other videos and I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.